guys? Matt, Legacy 4x4. We're gonna put a winch on the cheapest new side-by-side in the United States. It's a Badlands 5500 Apex winch. Really good for the price. Obviously there's a million reviews on them. They're a great unit. Gonna install this on the bed rail of the Z-Force 950 using some removable 1-inch, half-inch thick tube clamps. These are usually used for like steering parts. Usually you can mount like rams and stuff to the same type clamp. In any case, I'll be using the 1-inch bed rails on this 1,400-pound side-by-side to mount the winch and build everything off that. And since you may be wondering why I'm not just building it off the receiver hitch or this back 1 3/4 tube, the actual chassis tube, and instead I'm putting it in the bed right here. My reasoning is pretty simple. I want the back of the side-by-side to be as flat as possible. I don't want the winch to be the impact point. I want the roll cage to be the impact point itself. Same thing for the receiver tube. It's gonna stick way far out if I do that on the receiver tube. So I'm gonna opt for mounting it to the bed rails itself. The bed rails are bolted to the chassis with I think 4 different bolts, so it should be plenty fine. This whole side-by-side only weighs like 1,400 pounds, maybe 1,500 pounds. So I'm not too worried about it. The leverage there shouldn't be enough to rip anything off the chassis itself, like rip the bed off the chassis or break anything, and it should pull it absolutely fine. So yeah, that's my reasoning for mounting it off the bed. And as you can see, I also have an ATV box in the bed of it as well, just to store tools, cooler bags, and camera accessories really. So in any case, there's about a 6-inch gap in between my ATV box and the end of the bed. So that's where I'm gonna build this winch mount off of. Once the 1-inch clamps are in place, I'm gonna start beer mounting some winch plate mounts, and we're gonna build the actual support of the mount. Okay, so we have our 4 1-inch clamps in place on that upper bed rail. Next thing we're gonna do is install the winch plate support. And instead of using DOM tubing like I planned, I actually went to Harbor Freight and bought a Badlands winch receiver tube channel. And obviously this is pretty long. This is for the 12,000, 9,000 pound winches. So this 5500 is not gonna fit on it, but we're gonna re-drill it and also cut this to size. So first thing I'm gonna do is rest this in place and then get it beer mathed about even and start to mark where I want to cut. And obviously the goals here is to cut this perfectly flush with the upper part of the bed. This is C channel, I think 1/4-inch C channel, so it should be plenty sturdy without gusseting. So I'm just gonna mark where I want to cut it real quick, bring it back, make sure everything looks right, and we can go forward after that. Okay, I have it roughly marked. I'm gonna bring out the plasma cutter, rough cut right on the outside of this line. That way it leaves room for me to clean it up and clean up the edges and get this shaped. Make sure we have everything lining up properly. Okay, I have my piece cut. It's obviously missing a bunch because it's not a full-size winch, and I cut the whole front fair lead piece off because I'm gonna weld the original Badlands Apex 550 bottom fair lead and mount onto this plate. With that being said, I'm pretty happy with fitment. Let me throw it on, show you guys how everything's gonna line up. This is how the universal mounting channel lines up on those 1-inch spacers. So what's gonna happen is these are all gonna get tacked in, welded in place. I'm gonna clean up where I plasma cut roughly with the grinder, make everything look nice and smooth, kind of match the bed angles as well. And that's the way this is gonna work. So once this is tacked in, that'll be good to go. And these just unscrew from the bottom with Allen head bolts. It's important to note, I've made this mistake before, it's important to note that if you're gonna use these spacers for temporary and removable mounting hardware for pretty serious beefy stuff, you're gonna want to have them facing up on the roll cage. What that means is you have the roll cage going through and you have both the pieces clamped and they need to be straight vertical, because even if they're at an angle, you can't space them out once they're welded together, so they have to come straight up. Anyways, I digress, I've made that mistake before. Universal mounting channel is gonna get tacked in place, and to show you guys how it's gonna look with the Badlands winch, I went ahead and marked out the center, and here we go. So that's how it looks. It sits there. Those 2 1/4-inch plates are gonna get welded together and we're gonna be good to go. I thought about adding gussets to this universal channel since I did cut off the whole front of the channel. I don't think I'm going to. Like I said, everything is so light on the side-by-side that I don't think it's gonna flex at all with this 1/4-inch, basically angle iron channel. With that being said, if I do catch it flexing, I will be welding some gussets down here. And in the meantime, I'm gonna order some weldable tie-down mounts and weld some weldable tie-down mounts onto each side of here just to take up the space a little little bit. Those probably won't come in the mail before I finish this video since I'm trying to go off-roading with this unit tomorrow. So I'm gonna do what I can today. First thing I'm gonna do is tack everything in place, including the fair lead. I'm gonna take the winch off, obviously, take it over to the welding channel, fully weld it out, and put it back on, make sure everything's still lining up, and decide whether those gussets are gonna be there. Without further ado, let's get to welding. Okay, so we have everything welded on the whole back side, all the sides, etc. Fronts, everything's fully welded. With that being said, we're gonna take the 5500 Apex fair lead. I have the middle marked. We're gonna slap that in the middle, and then we're gonna mark the 4 bolt holes so we can take the universal channel over to the drill press and drill press out those bolt holes. That way we can adapt this together. I am gonna weld this fair lead directly to this universal mounting channel to add some strength there, but I do wanna drill these first before I weld it just in case. So I'm gonna take this over to the drill press, drill these out, and bring it back over, weld this on, paint it, bolt the winch up, and we should be good to go. Okay, so back at it. We are all clamped in place from all 4 of my 1-inch clamps, nice and sturdy. I have the fair lead bolted in as well. Now we're gonna bolt the winch in. So 4 bolts comes with the package. You guys could watch a video if you really need to know how to bolt the winch in. But for me, it's gonna sit right there. I'm gonna run the bolts from underneath, and we'll be good to go. Okay, everything's hard mounted. Next stop, wiring. Okay, so speaking of wiring, we have the winch wired in place with the blue and yellow terminals, the activation for the winch, and we mounted the solenoid inside the tough box, just sitting right in there. So I still have to run my positive and negative cables as well as my winch remote connector, and go figure, the kits don't come with enough wire to run the wire all the way from the back down through the center console tunnel up into the battery, so I'll be ordering that. So for now, we're gonna call this video halfway done. With that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and order parts. I'll see you guys in like 3 or 4 days when we get back to wiring up this Apex 5500 winch on the back of a CFMoto side-by-side. All right, well, I did not beat the rain, so you'll probably hear the rain on the metal roof, but I've got better news for you guys, and that better news is I actually ran to Harbor Freight for the 2nd time today, which I hate doing, but I ran to Harbor Freight and I picked up some 6-gauge jumper cables because the rest of the winch is wired in 6-gauge. 19 bucks for 16 feet of 6-gauge tied together cable, you know, red and black obviously, and use that to run to the battery since I don't have time to wait on Amazon, and my OCD kicked in and I wanted to finish this, so here we are. The winch is completely wired. I'll show you guys that in a second. I also went ahead and welded on some tie-down mounts since I was at Harbor Freight. Figured I'd grab 2 tie-down mounts as well. 10,000-pound tie-down mounts, even though obviously they'll never see more than like 300 pounds. In either case, everything's tied in. Let me show you the electronics. Okay, so you can see my 6-gauge pigtail and my ignition cable pigtail. Everything's tied together in there. Runs through the downspout for whatever filter that is for the side-by-side. Runs all the way through the center console. That was a pain to get off. That's why I didn't record it. Bunch of little push rivets. Anyways, all of it runs through the center console up into the battery. Before we get there, let's talk about the box. So I moved my 2 carrier cases. One of those is the GoPro for the GoPro mount. Obviously, the other one is the remote winch for the Apex winches. And if we look inside the box, as you can see, solenoid mounted to the end over there. And all my extra cable is kind of just sprawled in here for now. I promise I'll cable manage that in the future. Promise I'll cable manage that in the future. And here's the remote antenna for the remote Apex winch. It's just plugged in, and it just also sits in there nice and loose. Everything else is still on top of it. I'm not too worried about it. 6-gauge pigtail runs up through the center console area, all the way up towards the front. The ignition cable for the winch plugs into the fuel pump for the whole CFMoto. That's how that works. Nice little red neck straight into the relay. And then I have my 2 going into the battery as well. So that's how it works. Ran through the center console. And once the machine's running, as you can see, everything works absolutely fine. I'm happy with that. We'll go ahead and call this one done. So yeah, guys, rear winch mounted onto the bed with a removable mount. Everything's wired in as properly as it's gonna get for now. I'm happy with it. Anyways, I'm gonna go drink a few beers, get a good night's rest, and get up early. Get after it tomorrow at Gore, Virginia.